Welcome to 15-minute battles, where we demolish history's biggest conflicts in just 15 minutes. We dive deep into the world's most pivotal military clashes, from the ancient battlefields of Marathon to the complex strategies of modern warfare. The leaders, who were the legendary generals and forgotten heroes commanding the troops, and finally, the outcomes. If you love history, military strategy, and learning something new quickly, you are in the right place. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss another historic clash.
Ever dreamed of conquering an empire? Well, in 334 BCE, a young man named Alexander set out to do just that. This wasn't just any empire. It was the mighty Persian Achaemenid Empire, the superpower of the ancient world. After his father, King Philip II, was assassinated, the ambitious new king of Macedon, Alexander III, picked up the mantle of his father's grand plan. He crossed the Hellespont, the narrow strait separating Europe from Asia, with a relatively small but professional army. This was at the start of one of the most audacious military campaigns in history. The Persians weren't exactly shaking in their boots, at least not yet. The local governors, known as satraps, saw this as a problem they could handle. They gathered their forces, which included a significant number of seasoned Greek mercenaries, professional soldiers fighting for Persian gold. The stage was set for the first major showdown of this epic war, a confrontation that would unfold on the banks of a river in what is now modern-day Turkey, the Granicus. Let's look at the armies facing off. The Persian force was commanded by a council of satraps including men like Arsacians. They had about 15,000 to 20,000 soldiers. Their ace in the hole was their heavy cavalry, considered some of the best in the world. They also had a large contingent of those Greek mercenaries, battle-hardened hoplites, who knew how to fight in the Greek style. On the other side, Alexander's army was roughly the same size, but it was a different kind of beast altogether. It was a finely tuned combined arms force. The core was the Macedonian phalanx, infantrymen wielding the sarissa, an incredibly long pike that created an almost impenetrable wall of spear points. And then there was the elite heavy cavalry, the companions, led by Alexander himself. Alexander wasn't a general who sat back and watched. He always positioned himself on the right flank, the traditional place of honor and danger, ready to lead the decisive charge. The battlefield itself gave the Persians a huge advantage. They chose their ground well, setting up a defensive line on the high, steep, and muddy western bank of the Granicus River. This meant the Macedonians would have to charge downhill into the river, struggle through the water and mud, and then fight their way up a slippery bank, all while under attack. It was a defender's dream, but the Persian commanders made a critical strategic blunder. They placed their best unit, their cavalry, right at the river's edge. This might seem logical, meet the enemy as their most vulnerable. However, it meant their strongest infantry, the Greek mercenaries, were positioned behind the cavalry, effectively taking them out of the initial fight. They were just spectators as the battle began. Alexander and his army arrived late in the afternoon. His most experienced general, Parmenion, advised caution. He suggested they wait, camp for the night, and attack at dawn when the men were fresh and could cross the river unopposed. It was sound, logical advice. Alexander, however, was not a man who liked to wait. He saw a chance for a swift, decisive blow, and, against his general's counsel, he chose to attack immediately. This wasn't just impatience. It was a psychological move to show his own men and the enemy his absolute confidence. The battle began. Alexander first sent a smaller group of light cavalry and infantry across the river as a feint. This was a classic move to test the Persian line, draw their attention, and create a diversion. The Persians took the bait and shifted some of their forces to meet this initial probe. This was the moment Alexander was waiting for. Then came one of the most audacious acts in military history, with a battle cry. Alexander personally led his elite companion cavalry in a thundering charge. They plunged down the bank, across the Granicus, and straight towards the densest part of the Persian line. It was an incredibly bold, almost reckless maneuver. The crossing was brutal. The Macedonians were fighting against the current, the mud, and a hail of javelins from the Persians above. As they scrambled up the slick riverbank, they were met by a wall of Persian cavalry. The fighting was fierce, a chaotic, close-quarters melee of swords and spears. Alexander was right in the thick of it. He fought like a common soldier, his helmet making him a conspicuous target. At one point, a Persian nobleman, Spitharidates, raised his sword to strike Alexander from behind. Just as the blow was about to land, another Macedonian officer, Cletus the Black, galloped in and sliced off the Persian's arm, saving Alexander's life. It was a near-death experience that would become legendary. The sheer ferocity of the Macedonian charge, with Alexander at its very tip, was too much for the Persian line to handle. The intense pressure on their center, combined with the shock of seeing the enemy king fighting in their midst, caused the Persian cavalry to buckle. Panic began to spread. The Persian satraps, seeing their line break, were among the first to turn and flee. Once the leadership was gone, the rest of the cavalry disintegrated, abandoning the battlefield in a full-blown rout. But the battle wasn't over. Left stranded on the plain were the thousands of Greek mercenaries. Their employers had deserted them. The Greek mercenaries were professionals, and they quickly formed up into a solid defensive bloc, a phalanx of their own. They were surrounded and leaderless, but they were still a formidable fighting force. They tried to negotiate, requesting terms of surrender. This is where Alexander showed a ruthless side. In his eyes, these Greeks were not honorable opponents. They were traitors to the Hellenic cause, fighting for the Persian barbarians against a united Greek army. He refused their plea for mercy. He commanded his own Macedonian phalanx, which had by now crossed the river largely unopposed, to advance. The Macedonians, fresh and furious, surrounded the mercenaries. Almost all of them were cut down where they stood. It was a brutal but clear message. Anyone who stood with Persia would face annihilation. The Battle of the Granicus was a stunning and complete victory for Alexander. It was decisive in every sense of the word. In a single afternoon, he had shattered the power of the Persian satraps in Asia Minor. The entire western half of the Persian Empire, a vast and wealthy territory, was now open to him. He had secured his beachhead in Asia, ensuring his campaign could continue. But the consequences went far beyond territory. Granicus forged the legend of Alexander the Great. It established his reputation as a brilliant and audacious commander, a king who led from the front and was willing to risk everything for victory. It proved the superiority of his Macedonian army and sent a shockwave of fear through the Persian Empire. This was no mere raid. This was a war of conquest led by a military genius. The road to the heart of Persia was now open, and the victory at the Granicus was the first critical step on a journey that would change the course of history forever. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this story, be sure to like and subscribe for more epic tales from history.
And that wraps up today's 15-minute battle. If you want to master more moments of military history in less time, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you for the next 15-minute battle.